A participant in our Second Brain Enterprise program told me this recently, that they've spent $50,000 on AI tools, and it's only made their business worse. That made me realize most businesses out there are approaching AI completely backwards. And that's why I've brought in Hayden and Dale into the studio today. See, while everyone else is trying or experimenting or considering or studying the different AI tools, they've developed something much more practical and something very different, a readiness assessment. This assessment predicts AI success before you even start. You'll discover why adopting AI before answering this set of critical questions is practically a guarantee of failure. Dale and Hayden are my co-facilitators in the cohort-based course that we offer for business owners and leaders, which is called Second Brain Enterprise. You can find out more about it in the description below. The first question I have here, and I'd love to get your take on how you would ask this, how you would answer it, what are some of the things you take into account, is simply, what do you want AI to achieve in your business?
The way I would phrase that question is, what are you optimizing for as a business? And also, what is your business's bottleneck right now? Those are probably, what are the constraints that are stopping you from getting to what you're optimizing for? Some people are optimizing for the business to run without them, right? Or to avoid doing the things that they hate doing. I think AI is really uniquely suited to do the stuff you are not good at doing and you don't like doing, or to make it, tolerable or palatable, right? And so for me personally, that's actually the first thing I look to AI for. Is I really don't like driving accountability, right? It's just, I'm a classic visionary, right? It's boring to me, but AI can help do a lot of that and automate a lot of that. You might be optimizing for scale or growth. AI can help with that as well, right? You might be optimizing for exit and liquidity. AI can help with that as well. But the first thing is understanding, what outcome do I want, right? What am I optimizing for? And then what's stopping me from achieving that outcome?
Is there anything that AI can't help you optimize for?
I think AI can help with anything. Given the right context, AI is a genius coach, but you need to give AI the context, right, to be able to help. I would actually argue that no, there's actually probably nothing that AI can't help with. Obviously, there are certain things, which we'll get to, that are certainly more leverageable. And there are certain things that AI can do almost 100% of, right? Versus maybe helping you with 20%.
So what I heard in that is AI can help you optimize for practically any outcome, but you still need to decide what is the outcome that you want to optimize for. What happens if you just don't answer this question, you just skip it?
You end up doing a lot of different work for a lot of different types of people. Probably everything, even if you have a 20-year-old business, it still acts like a startup. Everyone wears a ton of different hats. There's probably a lack of consistency in your work product. You're probably still doing work, like you're probably working in the business, not on the business. You're probably working long hours, and everyone's probably working long hours. You're probably not seeing a lot of vacation. You're probably burnt out.
Number two is, which functions in your business can be most leveraged by AI?
The ultimate AI businesses today, and they're coming around today, have both customer acquisition and fulfillment fully automated in a workflow, right? And so right now, the fulfillment piece is basically software, right? So software companies today can effectively have two-person companies reach, hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe billion-dollar valuations, right? And you're seeing that right now, all these giant unicorns, they're all software. So customer acquisition, first of all, is highly, highly leveraged in different ways, right? And we can get into that. Fulfillment, if it's remote and it can be done on a computer, right, is also highly leveraged. Fulfillment, if it's in person and done with a wrench, is not that highly leveraged. But pieces of that fulfillment. So we have businesses like plumbing businesses. In the basic core value of a plumbing business is you send plumbers and trucks out to homes. They do work. They go to the next appointment. They go to the next appointment. They go to the next appointment, and come back. So you can't use AI to leverage much of the work that they're doing. You can use AI to have better pricing, make more money per appointment, be more efficient. You can use that. However, you can use AI for the CSR, the customer service and dispatch side, you can use AI to make that dispatch most efficient. You can use AI to make the customer service person be able to attend to 30 or 40 plumbers instead of 5 or 10. And all the shared functions, right? Finance. AI can highly leverage finance for you. And in terms of hiring, AI can't physically yet, do all of the actual interviews, but it can probably do 90% of the lift so that someone who was a dedicated people and culture person who may have, before being able to possibly bring in 2 to 3 hires a month could probably now bring in, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, because AI is actually doing all of the work in marketing the positions, screening the candidates, taking people out of the funnel. And now all the person needs to do is, make sure that the interviews happen. And even the onboarding, all of that stuff, much of that, again, if it can be done on a computer, it can be heavily, heavily leveraged.
Which functions of a business cannot currently be leveraged by AI? Because there's probably fewer than the ones that can at this point.
I mean, it's really anything that doesn't involve the use of a computer. AI can't currently paint your house. It can't mow your lawn. Now, when robotics comes out, all of that will then become possible. But I personally think we're quite far away from that. That doesn't mean, though, that those elements can't be supported. And so, again, when we look at these functions, I'll talk about them right now, right? You have this core value chain, which is how do you deliver value to your customers? And that to me is what most business owners should really be focusing their time on. And so you have a market to lead. How do people discover who you are and then basically give you permission to contact them again in the future? Then you have lead to sale. Once you've gotten their contact information, how do you then turn them into an actual paying customer?
Transaction of some kind.
And then depending on the business, you may have sale to delivery, right? So once someone has become a customer, what does handoff and onboarding of that customer look like? And that could be very, very simple in a digital business where it's automatic, or it could be quite complex in a construction business where there's, a whole bunch of scope that needs to be defined, a bunch of onboarding, et cetera. And then you have, the largest one, which is delivery to success, right? So, and that is your fulfillment of actually what you're doing. And then the last piece, which most businesses ignore, is basically completes this and turns this what was a linear look into a loop, which is success back to market, right? So or success to lead, right? And so that is how do you get reviews? How do you get referrals, from the work that you do? The interesting thing there is like when you look at let's say a totally manual, technician-based business that goes to your home, market to lead, 100% can be leveraged by AI. Lead to sale, very much can be leveraged by AI, not 100%, because someone's still doing the sale in the person's home, but there's ways you can go around that. So sale to delivery and delivery to success, not really. Some of it, like we mentioned, like the dispatch, route optimization, price optimization, et cetera, that goes to support that can be. And then, but that's a different set of processes that we call enabling process. But the success to market and the success to lead, which again, most companies are ignoring, and in my opinion, that's a key to having like a virtuous cycle in your business, 100% can be leveraged by AI.
So looking, it's sort of like instead of looking at the departments of a business, like the classic ones, operations, marketing, etc., you're looking at, even from a customer-centric point of view, the customer journey. Each segment of it can either be fully automated and taken over by AI, or partially leveraged, or at least enabled or improved in some way. Are there any that can't? You've mentioned them all. They basically all can, right?
Yeah, they all can be in some way. And like I said, if the delivery to success portion of that is handled manually or handled like outside of a computer, it's not as leveraged, right? And so that is the core value chain. It's interesting because no operating systems really talk about that from a process-centric point of view, meaning what are we internally focusing on and looking at? Some people look at that as, they call it the customer life cycle, but that's more of a customer, like an external, what is the customer experiencing? But I actually prefer it. I prefer looking at both ways, but I also prefer internally for us to be obsessed on that, us as a team to be obsessed with that. So that's the middle layer. You have a layer above, which has who are you, what are you doing, why are you doing it? So your business identity, your strategic planning, how are you, what's your unique value proposition, who's your customer? All of that influences very much sort of that core value chain. And then at the bottom, you have all of the enabling processes, right? And so things like financial performance management, how is that done? Things around hire to retire, right? How does all of your recruiting and retention and your culture, people systems work? There's a bunch of those at the bottom, but the ones that I've noticed in my business is the first things we focus on when we buy a business is we focus on this middle piece first. Then once we've got sort of a leadership team that understands the business, we focus on that top piece. And actually we do focus on two pieces of the bottom because they're really crucial, which is the hire to retire and the financial performance, because those are areas that can kill your business. But outside of that, we kind of leave that for later.
All right. Question number 3. Which parts of your business are ready for AI?
So, that question is part of the assessment and really builds on the question prior, right? What we use the term function. What are the areas? You might think of it in terms of like what collections of processes can be leveraged. And you gave some really great examples in that segment of things that are digital versus things that are more tangible, things that are related to the customer value chain versus things that are more strategic or foundational versus things that are more enabling or administrative would be some other words that people might find valuable. Understanding what those functions are in a particular case and what those categories of processes are. And then based on the kind of organization that you have, leads to the question of how mature are those functions and how ready to augment or automate via AI is it?
Again, shared language. What are the functions and how mature are they? And the assessment will walk you through that step by step. If you have, so I would say businesses may have processes actually outlined. They may have checklists in place. They may have flowcharts. Those are all signs of being more ready.
Mm-hmm.
If something just exists in somebody's head, if it's kind of based on tribal knowledge, I'd say that's a sign of probably having to do other work to get ready. But AI can help a lot with that work.
So what I'm hearing is you need a given function in your business to be documented, to have a process that is in some external form, not just in your head. Is that the basic prerequisite for AI to be able to improve it?
Yep. And the good news is if you don't have that, AI can help you make that.
Let's talk about that because most small business owners that I know don't have any semblance of what you just described. So how can AI help you get from lacking a process, at least a documented process, to having it be documented?
I mean, it's basically because it takes a long time to do. It's hard. It takes a long time to do, and it doesn't directly generate you revenue. And so the combination of those three things means it usually gets started and not finished. And then it turns into kind of a little bit of like a piece of shame for business owners. And so a lot of people don't like the word process and the P word because it kind of gives them that sense of, I know I should be doing that, but I'm not. So the beauty of it is documentation. And that is one of the things that AI is best at. What used to take, so I used to do this manually in all of my businesses, and it would take months. First we would go giant whiteboard, entire leadership team. Our first leadership team, we had a whole system, right? Our first leadership team workshop, we'd always outline one process and basically explain what process was, document how it looks today in a flowchart, document how maybe it should look in the future, and then get into, okay, leadership team, in your spare time, go create checklists and SOPs, right? And we'd create, a 3-month plan to do these things. It would often take 6+ months. AI, given the right context through a master prompt, AI can do that for you in seconds, right? Minutes maybe. And it does it like shockingly well, like probably better than your first 3 passes if you had done it manually, and it does it in minutes. Now you still have to then actually bring that into the real world, right? You still have to then bring it to your team and teach them it and ask them, does this actually work? And how are we going to measure this, right? All of that still has to be done. But because like that piece, you've no longer exhausted your team in the creation of it. Because of that, it's actually possible to finish it.
Let's move on to question number 4, which is, are you working remotely or in person? Why is that an important question to ask?
For the reason we mentioned before, is like basically, can this be done on a computer? And if you're working remotely, it can be done on a computer. Simple as that. And so any function, we add this in as a question just to really accentuate that. Any function that is remote and on a computer can be highly, highly leveraged. Any function that requires in person, less so.
So it seems like this question is about sort of just putting the different parts of your business on a spectrum of digital to in person, because a very similar spectrum tells you where AI is going to help immediately and where it's going to take some time. Let's move on to number 5. What things are easy and hard to do when it comes to AI?
So I would actually separate this into 3 levels of difficulty. And so the first is, can I just prompt ChatGPT or Claude or whichever LLM to help with what I need to do, right? And so that requires no code, requires no technology really outside of the LLM itself, very basic training.
Maybe even the free version up.
Yeah, exactly. And in some cases, when we're creating, checklists and processes now, you can just be like, make this prompt. And, your LLM has the context needed to help you with the answer. So that's sort of the most basic, right? The next is, can you use no code tools and workflows to create some level of automation? Those are things like N8N, using Make, using Zapier, right? Requires someone who's, got some decent level of experience with computers, but not really a programmer. And then the third is, do you need like custom implementations? Do you actually need to work with OpenAI's API? Do you need to work with like Slack's API, et cetera, right? And that's sort of the hardest piece. And then another piece of it is like, what actual tools are you using in your business that you want to continue using? And so if you're using Salesforce, for example, what does that integrate with, right? If you're using a very specific software that doesn't have a lot of integrations, how do you solve that?
You would look at a business and say, what things can be done, what initiatives, what projects with just LLMs, which ones need no code tools, and which ones need custom integrations. Those are the 3 levels. So how does someone who's not an AI expert know whether a given project or implementation in their business is at level 1, 2, or 3 without being familiar with all the different options and tools and different things? Is there an easy way to tell?
Ask your LLM with the right context, right? And that's what we teach, is like, how would I do this with only prompting versus how would I do this with a workflow versus how do I do this with agents, right? Those are kind of the 3 levels. What I see constantly, and you see this everywhere in YouTube, is like agents, the big buzzword, but 99% of the value may just come from prompting. And you can do prompting now, whereas the agent side might take months to integrate, and that integration may not be nearly as complete as you thought it was going to be.
It could be fragile. It might break with some new advance. So the problem of deciding which level you're at is itself a level 1 problem.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, next question, number 6. What's the impact or return on investment of a given initiative?
Again, that kind of goes down to how leveraged can it be by AI. One of the things we didn't talk about was, if something is highly leveraged by AI, like if I could do something 100 or 1,000 times faster, which there are many things you can do, are there actually diminishing returns in the business for doing it 100 or 1,000 times?
What would be an example?
Let's say newsletters, right? Let's say you're sending out newsletters, and it used to take someone a full day to do a really good newsletter, or it would take them a full day to create all of the content that would go out with the newsletter, right? So that might be like a blog post, it might be like a lead magnet or something like that. And now, like, that's one of the things that same person could probably do 30 in a day, right? 20 to 30. But is there actually value? Could you send 20 to 30 emails in a day? No, you couldn't. Could you publish 20 to 30 blog posts? You could, right? And there would be some level of value from that, right? So again, when you separate it, like, what's the unique value of this role into actually the constituent pieces, which is I'm creating good content, and then I'm sending that content to my subscribers. part of that value is I might be like SEO optimizing that content so people can find it, or maybe I'm also like, LLM optimizing that content so they can find it within ChatGPT. Send, which was probably 80% of the value, the send to could probably only be done the same amount that you've been doing it, right? Maybe if you've been doing it once a week, you can do it every day,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But you can't do it 30 times a day.
Yeah.
But the other pieces still add a lot of value.
What would be an example? So you're basically saying that some activities can scale, some can't. What would be something that you could do 100 or 1,000 times as often?
So if you wanted to contact businesses and contact strangers and let them know about your business, right? Another for like outbound marketing, from market to lead. Maybe you have, someone doing that right now and they're contacting 100 businesses a day. Well, in reality, if your addressable market is, 100,000 businesses, you could probably, and the reality of this is that only a small percentage of businesses open or respond at a time. So you could probably, reach out to that same business every 2 months, let's say, right? Or every 3 months. So realistically, you could likely do that 33,000 to 50,000 times a month and still see no diminishing returns from it.
Wow.
Right. And the reality is AI can do that automatically. So you could go from 100, let's call it 2,000 a month to 50,000 a month and see no diminishing returns. And it could be entirely automatic.
The question of what can be automated is one question. In this question of diminishing return, like what things should be automated is a different question, because there may be things that can be automated that should just be eliminated because they are bad things. Don't do those things anymore. Don't automate things that don't create value, or at least be aware of what that diminishing return is in the process of figuring that out.
Well, I know one of our customers, while we were going through the cohort of Second Brain Enterprise, one of our customers, we're going through the lead to sale part, and we're talking about RFPs, right? So creating proposals. This person just did it and took something that used to take something like 8 to 10 hours and made it take under 20 minutes. And so that's an unlock for the business. It's something they weren't doing before because it took so long. And so it's an unlock for the business because they actually could do that. Now, if they wanted to do that, 200 times a week, they absolutely could. And that's a massive unlock for their business. And maybe they price in, maybe it's not 100% the business they want to do. So they make it, they target a profit margin that's much higher. They could still get that business.
Number 7, what are the cultural beachheads you need to be aware of? First, maybe we should say what a cultural beachhead is.
This assessment question came up in the conversation that we'd had here recently about recognizing that you have to understand where there are points of cultural resistance. I think that the term beachhead came up as a sort of a metaphor for understanding, like we're driving our boat into the harbor, and there's a hidden sandbar, and you run into it. And if you're not aware of where that is, it can cause all kinds of issues. Like doing an AI initiative might make things worse, as a matter of fact. So being aware of what people's beliefs and points of resistance to the use of or the exploration of AI. You mentioned the term change management a bit ago, like understanding where we are and understanding what people's appetite might look like. How curious are they about these things?
It always amazes me how much humans just need to talk about things to digest and process any event, any kind of change, any new idea. There's like a mental digestion that just needs to be discussed, needs to be talked about. And maybe that would be a way of also discovering what those beachheads are. Like when you introduce, hey, everyone, we're thinking of doing this. What do you guys think? You'll probably get a series of responses that tell you where some of the beachheads are. All right. Last question. Which metrics will you use to track and measure the success of AI initiatives?
So what can't be measured can't be managed and improved, right? That is the core sort of management philosophy, and the same goes with AI implementation. This question is the last question because it really builds on everything else that we've talked about before. When you have a specific area, process, function, whatever you want to call it, that you need to improve, that needs to have a metric or success metric associated with it. In addition, right? Maybe you already have this. One of the biggest things is you need to now set new standards with AI. And the thing I've noticed more and more is, I look at businesses and buy business, it's the standards that really make the difference. Not only do you need to set those standards, you need to have that cultural beachhead and understanding of everyone accepting those standards. So number one is, what process are you applying this to? What was the metric of success? What's the new metric of success? What was the standard? What's the new standard? Outside of that, you actually have implementation specific measurables. How many processes are you actively implementing? How are you measuring them? Are things taking, how many times are you actually hitting that success rate? All of these things actually need to be measured. And again, if you don't manage to measure it, it's not going to get used.
Can you give an example of some activity or process, what the old standard was and what the new one is that you moved to?
Yeah, so I'll return to the newsletter example. In this case, in that newsletter example, it's no longer one person's full-time job. And that's a new standard that I'm saying, right? So I'm saying, okay, before you were writing a newsletter and sending it out every day, and that was 100% of your job. Now that only actually represents 10% of your job. And the other 90% is, maybe in this example, you're publishing and SEO optimizing and LLM optimizing posts or similar work. We now know that LLMs grab a lot from Reddit and from other social media. You're going to start posting there and use LLMs to do that. And so the role adapts and changes. And that's an example of the standard adapting for the actual piece, the measurement, but the role also adapting. Mm-hmm. And that person, again, needs to accept that. And that's culturally, that can be difficult to tell you, hey, Tiago, by the way, you now need to do what you were doing in 1/10 the time, and I'm going to add a whole bunch of other things for you to do. What incentive do you have? Because if I tell you, if you don't do it, you're going to get fired and I'll replace you with someone who does, you're probably going to resent me. So what incentive am I giving you to do that? Are you going to make more money? Are you going to work 4 days a week instead of every day? Are you going to get ownership of the company? Like, all of these things are possibilities.
I have another example, making it really tactical. That's a good one to talk about the newsletter creation and optimization of, and so on. I'll give a really very, very tactical example. So we talk about things that can be, digitally automated versus things that on a spectrum are very, physically tangible. Mm-hmm. An organization that I've had an opportunity to support is in the dry goods clothing space. Mm-hmm. And so one of the metrics, if you will, the success measures for them are, the percentage of fulfillment when one of their buyers, wholesaler or retail buyer, calls in and orders a particular product or group of products. Mm-hmm. The percentage of those they're able to fulfill is a standard measure of success. Mm. So in their particular space, the industry standard is somewhere, let's say, between 85 and 90%, meaning that if you call up and you order a collection of things and sizes and so on, they're going to be able to ship you between 85 and 90% of that at that moment, versus 100%, meaning they would have all of those things in stock at all times. Mm. So there's this diminishing return. Classically, pre-AI, they could choose the trade-off of saying, we want to have a really high rate of fulfillment, which is going to require us to marginally start to carry quite a bit more inventory than what we are able to financially sustain. Mm. So there's a financial question. So if we want to be at a 95 or a 97% fulfillment, that might move us up in the minds of certain buyers, but at what cost? Mm-hmm. What's possible? The other factors in that are understanding what buyers are going to want, in some cases, a season or season and a half in advance. It can be challenging. How are you going to collect that information? You're going to ask questions. You're going to get this information, and you're going to make some educated guesses about what to send orders to the factories across the pond for. Okay, new standard of success. With the use of AI as an example, we now might be able to move from an 85 to a 90 or a 92% fulfillment by using AI, not any more people necessarily. We can use AI to understand and predict buying patterns. We can also use it to understand and make some predictions about timelines and things like this. Formerly, it was reliant on some spreadsheets and some tribal knowledge and some gut instinct and some good guessing. But we've just teased out a bunch of that stuff to where we can actually move the standard of success to a higher level without creating this marginal increase in financial and capital requirement. So that's a new standard of success that is developed. Same people involved. In this case, we're not eliminating people. We're just essentially doing our jobs better as a result of the technology.
What I hear in that, I just want to repeat back, is almost like, so often in business, there's just trade-offs. There's no like, this is the right answer. It's this versus that, this metric versus that metric. You're kind of saying that AI changes the trade-offs.
Totally.
You can now start to have both or more of each than you could previously.
Yeah, maybe both, or maybe that the calculus of the trade-off can be understood in a different way. What was formerly accepted as a trade-off can be as a hard constraint. The edges of that start to get a little closer. We start to move in the direction of both.
So we talked, there's kind of 4 areas that I think AI really leverages well. We've talked, my example is kind of documentation, like the creation of content, right? And your example is in prediction, right? Mm-hmm. There's another example which can be in research, right? But the one that I like to think about most is personalization, right? And so personalization is actually more about conversion rate, right? And so I mentioned before the example of there's not really a diminishing return of me reaching out to 50,000 people a month instead of 2,000 people a month. Well, actually, I can also use AI to highly personalize each of those 50,000 messages. So when I look at that role, right, or that function, let's call it, right, I might have before looked at that being, okay, we're going to reach out to 2,000 people, we're going to get a 3% reply rate, and that's going to be whatever that is, right? Now I'm saying we're going to reach out to 50,000 people, but we're going to get a 6% reply rate or an 8% reply rate because those 50,000 people got a personalized video from a person, right? And if you look, and that's something we're doing actively, right? It's a personalized video reaching out to them, literally showing like a little Loom style video of your face on their website, right? And that obviously has a much higher open rate because it's perceived as someone put like real time into this. Now that may only work for a certain period of time until everybody's doing it and everyone can recognize it. But that's the type of thing where you can really exponentially increase the standard.
It's almost like AI gets certain tasks or certain kinds of tasks and just collapses the time and energy and money it would take to produce them. So like on my team, asking for reports is a big one. Like anytime I want to know, customers who came in through this acquisition channel, how much money do they tend to spend? In the past, that would have been like pulling teeth because someone has to stop. We don't have a business analyst on staff. They'd have to stop their job, go compile all that data, write it up. Now I just get reports, almost the same day in many cases.
And it's because your people are using AI.
Oh, big time.
Yeah, and it's because they know and they're using AI with enough context to actually just be able to ask in an LLM, hey, I need to do this. What do I need? How should I do this? And it'll just tell you and then feed it back in.
Yeah, I guess the next step would be to close that loop and me personally be able to give the AI, because basically what that person is doing is going to some system, gathering the context. They need to give it to an LLM to produce the report. But we should be able to get to the point where my LLM that I'm using already has that context and I could just ask it directly and then go from 1 to 2 days down to minutes. All right. Well, thank you both for contributing so much valuable knowledge and so many insights. If you liked what you heard, I really encourage you to use this QR code or the link in the description to get your very own personalized AI readiness assessment and find out whether or not your business is ready for AI. And not just that, but where to start, how to approach that, and how to avoid some of the common pitfalls. And I'll see you next time.